Ava Reynolds stood at the front of the classroom, her hands gripping a note card so tightly the edges crumpled. "My mom works at NASA," she said, voice steady but small. For half a second, the room was silent. Then came the first snicker, sharp as a paper cut. It spread like wildfire. Chuckles, whispers, full-blown laughter rolling across the room like a wave Ava couldn't escape. From the back, someone muttered, "Yeah, right," and Miss Carter, standing by the whiteboard, gave the kind of tight smile adults wear when they don't want to call a kid a liar out loud. Ava didn't flinch. She didn't cry, but something inside her shifted like a crack forming deep beneath a frozen lake. She swallowed the burn rising in her chest and sat down, feeling every stare, every doubt. They had already decided girls like her didn't belong among the stars. But what they didn't know was the stars had already sent someone. The bell rang, but Ava didn't move. Around her backpacks slammed shut, and sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor as kids raced for the door, leaving behind nothing but the echo of their laughter. She sat there, small and still staring at the whiteboard where her truth had been swallowed whole. Miss Carter didn't look her way as she straightened the stack of homework papers, pretending not to notice the one girl left sitting. Ava finally stood, backpack sagging off one shoulder, and walked out into the hallway where the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects. She kept her head down all the way to the bus. Nobody said her name. Nobody said sorry. The ride home blurred past her window. Cars, trees, the low hum of the city where people chased important things that didn't have space for girls like her. By the time the bus squealed to a stop at the corner of Willow Lane, Ava's hands were fists deep in her hoodie pocket. She trudged down the sidewalk toward the small two-story house with chipped blue paint and a porch light that flickered even in daylight. The door creaked when she pushed it open. Inside, the world was different. Warm, golden, alive with the smell of onions sizzling in butter. Home didn't laugh at her. Home believed her without needing proof. Her mother, Dr. Maya Reynolds, stood at the stove in gray sweats and a NASA hoodie, stirring a pot like she was mixing together whole galaxies. "You're late," Maya said. Not accusing, just noticing Ava dropped her backpack with a heavy thud and mumbled, "Had to wipe desks." Maya glanced over her shoulder, reading more in Ava's slumped posture than the words she didn't say. She turned down the burner, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and crossed the kitchen in 3 strides. She didn't ask right away. She sat down across from Ava at the small, scarred kitchen table, the same one they'd built together one summer from a kit missing half the screws, and waited. When Ava finally spoke, it came out brittle and small. "They laughed at me." Maya didn't flinch. She didn't gasp or launch into angry words. She just leaned in, her voice low and even. "Why?" Ava stared at the peeling corner of the table. "I told them you work at NASA. They didn't believe me." Maya nodded, as if she'd been expecting this day, as if she had lived it herself. "Did you tell the truth?" she asked. Ava's head snapped up. "Of course." "Then that's enough," Maya said simply. "Other people's small minds don't shrink your truth." Ava's throat tightened. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear those words until they filled the empty places inside her. Maya smiled, a real one, and reached into her hoodie pocket. From it, she pulled her worn NASA badge, clipped to a navy lanyard, speckled with tiny stars. She set it on the table between them like an offering, like armor. "You want me to come to Parents' Day?" she asked casually, as if it was no big deal, "as your +1. Ava blinked, stunned. "You'd do that?" Maya chuckled. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. Besides," she tapped the badge, "might be time some folks around here learned what a rocket scientist looks like." A tiny, trembling laugh escaped Ava's chest before she could stop it. For the first time that day, the weight pressing on her ribs lifted just a little. She nodded, clutching the badge like a lifeline. Maybe, just maybe, the stars weren't as far away as they felt. The days leading up to Parents' Day moved like thick molasses, slow and heavy, and impossible to outrun. The school buzzed with nervous energy. Kids whispered about which parent was cooler, who might bring cupcakes, who had the fanciest job. Ava said nothing. She sat at her desk, hands folded neatly, eyes on her work, pretending not to hear. She hadn't told anyone her mother was coming. Not Ms. Carter, not Chloe or Liana, who sometimes sat with her at lunch when no one else did. Not even Ethan, who once traded her a fruit snack just because she looked sad. She kept the secret tucked tight inside her chest, holding it like a tiny flickering flame. She was terrified might blow out if she breathed too hard. At night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining every possible way it could go wrong. What if her mom's badge wasn't enough? What if they still laughed? What if worse, they smiled politely and didn't believe her even then? Doubt gnawed at her in the quiet hours when the world slept, and monsters, the real kind, the ones that wore doubt and shame like second skins, crawled out from the corners of her mind. During the day, she rehearsed it in her head. Her mom walking into the classroom, standing tall, explaining everything, so clearly no one could deny it. She pictured the hush falling over the room, the widened eyes, the slack jaws. She let herself imagine it just long enough to breathe a little easier before guilt dragged her back down. Hope was dangerous. She had learned that early. Hope could crack you open if you weren't careful. So instead of hoping, she focused on preparing. She ironed her best jeans, she cleaned the scuff marks off her sneakers with an old toothbrush. She sharpened her pencils until the points could split a hair. Anything to keep her hands busy, her mind busy, so she wouldn't spiral into the what-ifs that waited behind every thought. On Thursday afternoon, Ms. Carter handed out a bright yellow flyer, Parents' Tuesday, 900 am. Refreshments provided. The words stared back at Ava like a dare. Beneath it in neat letters was a list of all the parents scheduled to come. Her mother's name wasn't there. Ava had never turned in the permission slip. She had folded it carefully into a tiny square and hidden it at the bottom of her backpack, where loose crumbs and broken crayons lived. It wasn't that she didn't want her mom there. It was that she was scared to want it too much, scared to need the room to change and find that it stayed exactly the same. But when she got home that night, she found the permission slip sitting on the kitchen table, signed in her mother's elegant looping script, Dr. Maya Reynolds. Underneath a sticky note, "I'll be there, kiddo, always." Ava pressed the notes to her chest and let herself smile for the first time in days. She still didn't tell anyone at school. Not Ms. Carter, not Chloe, not Liana, not Ethan. She wanted it to be a surprise. No more than that, she wanted it to be a reckoning. Friday morning. Ava woke before her alarm. She dressed carefully, pulling her pink scrunchie tight around her braids, tying her sneakers just right. She glanced at the mirror and saw something new staring back. A girl who was scared but standing anyway. The bus ride felt different. The school looked different, even the air tasted sharper. Electric like a storm about to break. Something was coming. And this time Ava was ready to meet it. The classroom smelled faintly of pencil shavings and cheap sugar cookies. When Ava walked in, Parents' Day decorations sagged from the walls, paper stars taped haphazardly above the whiteboard, a half-deflated balloon tied to Ms. Carter's desk. Desks had been pushed into a wide horseshoe, leaving a nervous gap in the middle for parents to stand and speak. Ava slid into her seat, tucking her backpack neatly beneath her chair. Her heart pounded in a steady, relentless drumbeat against her ribs. The clock above the door ticked louder than usual. On Colmer a.m. Parents began trickling in. A man in a grease-stained mechanic's jumpsuit, a woman in pink hospital scrubs, a couple mums with oversized tote bags and Starbucks cups waving too hard at their kids. Mrs. Carter smiled brightly, the kind of tight, practiced smile grown-ups wore when they were trying too hard to make something feel special. One by one, parents stood in the middle of the room, told stories about fixing toilets, managing dental offices, teaching yoga to toddlers. There was polite clapping, there was forced laughter, but Ava barely heard any of it. Her eyes kept darting to the door. And then, right as Miss Carter cleared her throat to announce the next speaker, the door swung open. A woman stepped inside, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Ava could almost hear the sharp intake of breath ripple across the room. Dr. Maya Reynolds stood framed in the doorway. Black blazer tailored to sharp perfection. Crisp black slacks, polished black shoes. Around her neck, a navy lanyard heavy with a silver NASA badge that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. No jewelry, no frills, just presence. Commanding, unapologetic, unmistakable. Every pair of eyes swung toward her as if pulled by invisible strings. Even Ms. Carter froze mid-sentence, blinking like she wasn't sure what she was seeing. Ava rose from her seat without waiting to be called. Her voice, when it came, was clear and sure. "This is my mom," she said, "Dr. Maya Reynolds." A beat of silence. Then Ms. Carter stammered, "Welcome, Dr. Reynolds. Would you like to share a little about your work?" Maya smiled. Not wide, not flashy. A small, contained smile. The kind of smile that says, "I know exactly who I am, and I don't need you to validate it." She stepped into the center of the room, her badge catching the light with every movement. "Good morning, everyone." She began, her voice calm, even but laced with a quiet power that made the hairs on Ava's arms stand up. "I'm an aerospace systems engineer at NASA." The room shifted. Chairs squeaked. Several kids leaned forward without realizing it. "I work on mission planning, flight system integration, and operational strategies for our lunar and Mars programs." Maya continued, letting each word settle into the stunned silence. In the back, Mason, the same boy who had laughed the loudest, stared slack-jawed. Ethan nudged Liana, who elbowed him back, eyes wide. Even Miss Carter's professional smile faltered at the edges. She clutched her clipboard like a life raft. Ava sat down slowly, her heart hammering. Not from fear now, but from something fiercer, prouder, a roar growing inside her chest she barely recognized as her own. Dr. Maya Reynolds didn't rush. She didn't soften herself to make them comfortable. She simply stood there, badge gleaming, shoulders back, and let them feel the weight of what they hadn't believed. And Ava. She sat taller than she ever had before, because now they knew. Now they all knew. Maya shifted slightly, reaching into her blazer pocket and pulling out a folded sheet of paper. It wasn't flashy, just a printed schematic, creased from use. The kind that smelled faintly of printer ink and long nights spent drafting under fluorescent lights. She clipped it to the whiteboard with a magnet and turned back to face the room. "This," she said, tapping the diagram with a manicured nail, "is part of a life support system we developed for the Artemis missions that will return humans to the moon and eventually send them to Mars." Her voice was steady, unhurried. She didn't over-explain, didn't apologize for the complexity. She spoke to them as if they could understand, because she believed they could if they tried. "My job," she continued, "is to make sure that when a human being leaves Earth's atmosphere, everything they need to survive air-water communication, energy works flawlessly." A few students leaned forward, their faces pinched with concentration. Ms. Carter scribbled something on her clipboard, her cheeks tinged pink. Maya let the silence stretch for a beat longer than was comfortable. Then she looked around the room. Really looked, making eye contact with almost every child, every adult, every doubter who had once laughed at her daughter. And when she spoke again, her voice lowered just slightly, carrying a different kind of weight. "I didn't come here today just to impress you," she said. "I came here because my daughter told you the truth, and some of you chose to laugh." The words struck the room like a slow, measured thunderclap. No one moved. No one dared to whisper. Maya paced a step forward, not aggressive, but deliberate. "And that laughter wasn't just about her words," she said quietly. "It was about who you thought was allowed to say them." A flush of shame rippled through the classroom. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim as if the room itself was shrinking under the truth. Maya's gaze softened, not with pity, but with certainty. "You see, brilliance doesn't always wear the clothes you expect. It doesn't always speak with the accent you're used to hearing. It doesn't always come packaged in loud voices or shiny shoes." She paused, letting the air thicken. Ava could barely breathe. Her heart was pounding so hard it almost hurt, but it was a good hurt. A stretching kind, like wings unfolding. "So, the next time someone tells you something that sounds too big to believe," Maya said, her voice threading through every crack in the room, "don't laugh first. Listen first." Her words settled deep, deeper than facts and figures ever could. Deeper than the paper stars on the wall. Deeper than the rote clapping that followed every parent presentation before hers. Because belief, real belief, isn't about making someone prove themselves, Maya finished. It's about making space for the possibility they're telling you something true. She stepped back, then unhooking the diagram from the board with a calmness that dared anyone to doubt her again. She didn't need applause, she didn't need validation. Her presence had already done what she came to do. Maya turned, caught Ava's eyes across the room and smiled. Not the tight kind adults use to survive uncomfortable moments, but the real kind. The kind that says, "I see you, I hear you, and I stand with you." And for the first time that day, Ava didn't feel small. She felt massive, larger than the room, larger than the shame they tried to place on her. She wasn't just holding her own truth anymore, she was standing inside it. Before she was Dr. Maya Reynolds, aerospace systems engineer at NASA. She was just Maya Johnson, the skinny girl with scabbed knees and dreams too big for her zip code. She grew up on the south side of Austin, Texas, in a house that sagged slightly to the left with peeling paint and a front porch that groaned under every step. The air always smelled like diesel fuel and fried food, and nights were punctuated by the hum of sirens or the pop of firecrackers or sometimes gunshots. No one ever really knew. Her mother worked double shifts at a hospital laundry, folding sheets that smelled of bleach and tired bodies. Her hands always chapped her eyes, always rimmed red. Her father wasn't around long enough to leave much more than a handful of memories and an old toolbox missing half the sockets. From the beginning, Maya knew she was different. While other kids played jump rope or practiced double dutch on the cracked sidewalks, Maya took apart anything she could get her hands on. Broken radios, rusted-out VCRs, fans that wheezed and coughed before dying. She built things ugly, crooked little machines that whirred and sputtered, but somehow worked. She wasn't interested in dolls or dresses. She wanted gears, circuits, wires. At 8 years old, she wandered into the local library because it was the only building in her neighborhood with working air conditioning. And there, in a dusty corner labeled Science and Nature, she found a tattered book about the Space Shuttle Challenger. She devoured it in one sitting cross-legged on the cold tile floor, her heart thrumming like a second pulse. By the time she closed the book, her fate was sealed. She didn't just want to touch the stars, she wanted to build the ship that would get there. But dreaming was easy. Believing was harder. At school, she learned quickly that raising her hand too often made teachers uncomfortable, that correcting a math error on the board earned her not praise but thinly veiled annoyance, that when you were a skinny black girl with scraped shoes and secondhand notebooks, people didn't want you to be extraordinary. They wanted you to stay exactly where they expected you to be. In 8th grade, her guidance counselor called her into the office. Maya sat there, heart-hammering, waiting for advice about engineering programs or science fairs. Instead, the counselor smiled politely and slid a pamphlet across the desk. "Fast track to secretarial success." "You're very organized," the woman said. "You'd make an excellent administrative assistant one day." Maya smiled, folded the pamphlet neatly, and dropped it into the trash can on her way out. She learned early to stop asking permission, to stop waiting for validation that was never coming. In high school, she saved every penny she made tutoring younger kids in math and working weekend shifts at a greasy spoon diner. When other girls bought lip gloss and sneakers, Maya bought secondhand textbooks. Introduction to Engineering, Thermodynamics for Beginners, Basic Programming in C++. She studied until her fingers cramped, until her eyes blurred. Not because anyone was pushing her, because no one was, because she had decided somewhere deep in her marrow that she would not be folded into someone else's small story. She applied to the Summer Engineering Academy at Georgia Tech. Her teachers tried to dissuade her. "It's very competitive," they said. "It's expensive to apply." They said, "Wouldn't you rather focus on something more realistic?" Maya didn't argue. She filled out the forms, wrote her essays, paid the application fee with 3 months' worth of tips, and mailed it off without telling anyone. When the acceptance letter arrived, she sat on the cracked steps of her front porch and cried so hard she scared the neighbor's dog into barking. Not because she was sad, because for the first time someone outside her own head had said yes. That summer changed everything. At Georgia Tech, she met kids who loved equations more than gossip, who stayed up until 2:00 a.m. debating propulsion theory, who didn't blink when she said, "I want to work for NASA someday." They didn't laugh. They nodded. They asked what kind of missions she wanted to design. Maya came back home taller, not in body but in spirit. She walked differently, spoke differently. Not louder, just firmer, like the ground she stood on belonged to her now. College was the next mountain. She earned a scholarship to Auburn University, majoring in aerospace engineering. In her cohort of 200 students, she was one of only 3 black women. It didn't get easier. In group projects, she was always asked to take notes rather than solve problems. Professors mispronounced her name semester after semester, even when it was printed in bold on her papers. She learned to fight battles in silence, outwork, outlast, outshine. There were nights she wanted to quit, when her hands trembled from exhaustion after a double shift at the diner, when she overheard classmates whispering that she must have gotten in for diversity points, when her scholarship almost got pulled because she couldn't afford a lab fee on time. But she didn't. She stayed. She showed up again and again and again. In her final year, she graduated top of her class, valedictorian of the engineering school. The applause at the ceremony was polite, scattered, and thin. She didn't need it. She carried her own applause inside her ribs. After graduation, she landed an internship at Lockheed Martin, where she spent 18 months proving herself all over again. Late nights, early mornings. Designs rejected. Rewritten. Resubmitted. And then, one rainy March afternoon, while she sat in a laundromat feeding quarters into a broken dryer, her phone rang, a Houston number, NASA. The woman on the other end spoke in clipped professional tones. Offer position, aerospace systems, engineer. Start date, May 15th. Maya leaned back in the cracked plastic chair, blinking at the ceiling. Too stunned to move, her hands smelled faintly of detergent and burnt fabric softener. It didn't matter. She was in. She called her mother first. She barely got the words out before her mother started sobbing into the phone. That night, Maya fell asleep, still wearing her laundromat hoodie, a half-folded basket of towels at her feet, dreaming of stars. And when she finally walked through NASA's front gates 3 months later, badge around her neck, head held high, she wasn't just carrying her own dreams. She was carrying every no she'd ever been given. Every laugh, every side-eye, every time someone told her, "Girls like you don't do things like that." And she smiled because they were wrong. And she was proof. The room moved strangely after Maya Reynolds sat down. It wasn't loud anymore. It wasn't buzzing with whispers or restless shuffling. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that happens after a storm, not fearful but raw, stripped of all pretense, like everyone was seeing a different sky now, a different set of stars. Miss Carter stumbled through introducing the next parent, a man who ran a used car dealership, but no one really listened. Even he seemed to sense the difference, his voice faltering halfway through a story about financing deals. Ava sat straighter in her chair than she ever had before, not because she was trying to prove anything, not because she needed anyone's approval anymore, but because the truth was too big to fit inside her chest now. It filled her steady and certain. It anchored her to the floor in a way no cruel word or sideways glance could shake. For the first time all year, Ava didn't search the room for someone to smile at her, to offer silent permission to exist. She didn't shrink. She didn't hide. She was simply there, solid, undeniable, irrefutable. Across the horseshoe of desks, Chloe caught her eye and gave a small, hesitant smile. Liana gave a quick, awkward thumbs up. Even Ethan, loud snickering. Ethan sat with his hands folded, chewing on his lip, like he wasn't sure what to say anymore. Mason muttered something under his breath, but it didn't land the same way it would have before it bounced harmlessly off the new Ava. The Ava who knew exactly who she was. The bell rang. Backpacks rustled, chairs scraped. But Ava didn't rush. She packed her things slowly, deliberately, moving with the unhurried grace of someone who understood that the ground they walked on was theirs by right, not by permission. As she slid her backpack onto one shoulder, Miss Carter called out softly, "Ava, can I speak with you for a moment?" Ava hesitated. The old Ava might have panicked. The new Ava simply nodded and crossed the room. Miss Carter's voice was lower than usual, almost hesitant. "I just wanted to say you must be very proud of your mother." Ava met her teacher's eyes without flinching. "I am," she said simply. And for the first time, Miss Carter didn't look skeptical. She just nodded, small and real. No forced smile, no tight politeness, just recognition. Ava turned and walked out of the classroom, the hallway stretching ahead of her like an open runway. She didn't feel small. She didn't feel like she had to apologize for existing. She felt ready. Ready for the next question. Ready for the next challenge. Ready to carry her truth wherever it needed to go. Because the stars weren't waiting for permission. And neither was she. 1 week after Parents' Day. The world hadn't changed dramatically. The same crooked posters still hung in the hallways. The cafeteria still smelled like burnt pizza and chlorine from the gym. The morning announcements still crackled with bad audio. But something inside Ava had shifted, and because of that, everything felt different. She didn't expect a parade. She didn't expect the kids who had laughed to suddenly become her best friends, and they didn't. Some still looked at her sideways. Some muttered half-hearted comments when they thought she wasn't listening. A few avoided her altogether, as if proximity to her new truth made them uncomfortable. Ava didn't mind. She wasn't living for their approval anymore. She was living for something bigger, something tethered to the stars, to possibility, to the memory of her mother's steady voice filling that classroom like oxygen. On Friday, Ms. Carter passed around a stack of papers with a new assignment, Career Dreams, What Do You Want to Be? The room filled with the scratch of pencils and the occasional whisper. Ava took her time. She didn't rush. She didn't second-guess. In neat, careful handwriting, she wrote, "Engineer for space missions." Because someone has to figure out how to get us there, and I think I can. When Ms. Carter read it aloud during the afternoon, sharing circle, the room didn't laugh. They didn't roll their eyes. They listened. Really listened. And for Ava, that was enough. Later at recess, Chloe and Liana wandered over to her spot on the bench by the jungle gym. They didn't say much, just sat with her, kicking their feet in the dirt, swapping ideas about robots and space stations instead of slime videos and TikTok dances. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It didn't need to be. It was something quieter, sturdier respect. At home that night, Akva pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and started sketching a new design. A ship that could fold and unfold like a flower, catching sunlight, no matter which way it turned. She didn't worry about whether it was perfect. She just built and dreamed. Before heading to bed, she pinned her drawing to the fridge right next to her mom's grocery list. When Maya saw it the next morning, she didn't say anything at first. She just smiled that small, knowing smile and added 3 words beneath the sketch in looping handwriting. "Reach higher, Ava." And Ava would not, because she needed to prove anything to the kids who once doubted her, not even because she wanted to make her mother proud, though she did, but because now she understood something no one could take away. She belonged among the stars, and she always had. The truth is, brilliance doesn't need permission. It doesn't wait for applause or bend itself smaller to fit someone else's comfort. It shows up quietly, fiercely in classrooms, on playgrounds, in homes with sagging porches and battered front doors. It shows up in the hands of children who dare to dream out loud, even when the world tells them to whisper. When you believe a child, you build more than confidence. You build armor, you build wings, you build a map. They can follow when the road gets dark. And when you show up for them, when you stand beside them without asking them to shrink, you don't just change their story. You change the world they believe they deserve to live in. So the next time a young voice tells you something bold, something beautiful, don't laugh, don't doubt. Believe them out loud, because sometimes that belief is the spark that ignites everything.